Thanks for joining me at coachinglaw.com. As part of these stories, I should say that the names, facts and circumstances of each case or story have been changed. My talks are from an English law perspective only and are just my views, and so none of the information provided should be relied upon by you. If you have any issues or problems, then you should see your own lawyer or solicitor. And if you don't have one, then you can email me at jimmy@coachinglaw.com and I might be able to point you in the right direction. Having said all that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Welcome to this video. It was a Friday night and I got a call from Dan. I was just packing up, but Dan was a good client. And so, although I was looking forward to going out with colleagues and friends at the end of a long work week, I unpacked my laptop, got back to my desk and heard Dan's story. I've been working with Dan as a client for a while as his business grew, and he is now in talks with investors about getting further investment to take the business to the next level. However, he's worried. One thing that Dan was worried about was that the investor was asking questions about who owned the IP in Dan's platform and app. Dan was convinced that he and his company owned all the IP in the platform and app, but the investors had started raising questions about the freelancers and consultants that Dan had used to create and build the platform. His potential investors were concerned that those consultants and freelancers might have a claim on the platform and apps in terms of the IP that they had contributed to the platform and the app. Dan just wanted me to say that Dan owned all the IP under law. Unfortunately, as we went through the call, it transpired that Dan had used a lot of freelancers and consultants to work on his platform and apps, and many of them had simply worked without contracts and had simply invoiced for their work, and Dan had paid them. And as far as Dan was concerned, he owned all the IP that they had created for him, and that was it. However, as I went on to explain, this was not exactly true, and that in the circumstances he explained to me, English law provided that although Dan and his company could continue to use the work and IP created by the freelancers and consultants, technically the legal ownership of that IP in the work still belonged to the relevant freelancers and consultants. This came as a bit of a shock to Dan. As we went through what the law provided for exactly, he began to understand that what should have happened was that he should have had contracts with these freelancers and consultants, which not only provided for payment, but also made it clear that all IP created by these freelancers and consultants would belong to Dan and his company. Okay, said Dan, but what do I do now? This was a tricky situation. How me and my team helped to deal with this was to go back to some of the consultants and freelancers who were still used and confirmed the position with them in new contracts with Dan that we drafted and which covered both past and future work to essentially rectify the position. With freelancers and consultants that Dan wasn't going to use in the future, these were freelancers and consultants quite close to Dan, and so they were fine signing confirmation IP agreements that said that Dan owned the IP. I think that Dan was lucky. Obviously, if he hadn't been able to enter into contracts after the event, and if he wasn't close with the consultants and freelancers that he had used, they could have refused to sign anything regarding transferring the IP to Dan and his company. Alternatively, they may have asked for additional money in order to transfer the IP in the relevant work to Dan and his company. Okay, Dan was lucky, but I think that you can't rely on luck every time. This was one of the stories that sticks in my mind when anyone is hiring consultants and freelancers to help build their business. When hiring, I think it's always important to have a contract and also to make sure that the contract deals with the IP position and who owns the IP.